In this video, we'll be looking at section 9.4, cosine and inverse cosine. And our essential question will be, how can I use cosine to find triangle side lengths and angle measures? So cosine is very similar to sine. We're just going to use a different side than we used for sine. So over here, let's review what we did for sine. So for sine, we said sine of our focus angle is equal to our opposite, OPP, over our hypotenuse. And an acronym we can use to help us remember that is SO. SOH. Sine, opposite, hypotenuse. Now for today's, we're going to do cosine. So for cosine, we'll say COS, cosine of our focus angle, and this will be equal to our adjacent over hypotenuse, like so. And to help us remember this, we'll use CA, C-A-H, cosine, adjacent, hypotenuse. So today we're going to be focusing on adjacent and hypotenuse. So let's do a couple of examples. So we'll do that as example 1, example 2, we'll do this, and then we'll do a third example. And for our third example, we will do this. Like so. So these are the 3 examples we'll do. So first thing we want to do is label our triangle like we've been doing, identifying our focus angle, and then labeling from there. So if this angle is my focus angle, this 32, circling red, so that's where my focus is. Now I can label everything. Hypotenuse is always across from our right angle. Opposite is always across from our focus angle, so I'm just going across. And then adjacent is that side that's touching our focus angle, but is not the hypotenuse. And now we just set up, now that we have our triangle labeled, we can set up our cosine using this formula right here. Cosine of our focus angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So I'm going to say cosine cosine of our angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's plug some things in. Well, I know my angle is 32, so I can plug that in. And then I know my adjacent, I'm doing adjacent over hypotenuse for this one. So my adjacent side is my x, and my hypotenuse is 12. And then we ask ourselves, how do I solve this? Well, to solve this one, it looks like we'll have to cross multiply to find out what x equals. So since our x is in our fraction, we'll know we'll have to cross multiply. So the first thing we do is type our cosine 32. So we're going to use our calculator for this. So I'll say cosine 32. That gives me my decimal, 0.48. So cosine 32 is 0.848. And then that is equal to x over 12. Now I just am cross multiplying, so 1 times x is x, and then 12 times 0.848, 12 times 0.848 is equal to 10.2, like so. So that's how we can use cosine to help us find those missing side lengths. So the key is just to set up, given what you have, and then decide how you're going to solve. You don't need to necessarily know exactly how we're going to do it. Just set up and then decide. So let's try that for number 2. We're going to set up and then decide. So first we'll label. Well, here's my focus angle right there where x is. So if I'm using my focus angle, across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. So that's the 18 will be our hypotenuse. Across from my focus angle is the opposite side. And then the side touching my focus angle is our adjacent side, like so. Now let's set up our cosine. So we know we're going to do cosine of our focus angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So my focus angle is my x. We don't know. That's what we're going to be trying to solve for. And then my adjacent was 4. The adjacent is 4. And the hypotenuse is 18. Now how are we going to solve for this one? I want to get the x by itself, so I got to get rid of this cosine. So to get rid of cosine, we'll use inverse cosine, cosine inverse. So the first thing I do is my division, so I'll do 4 divided by 18. That's going to give me 0.222. Just doing top divided by bottom. Bring down my cosine of x. Now to get rid of cosine, we have to use that cosine inverse idea. And we do the same thing to both sides. Cosine inverse cancels out cosine, so I have x equals And this is what I'm typing in my calculator. Cosine inverse of 0.222. So go back to our calculator. Remember, you either use your inverse button or your second button. Mine is inverse, so I need to hit that. Then I'll grab my cosine inverse and go 0.222, and we get 77 degrees, 77.2 degrees. So x equals 77.2 degrees, like that. So it's really like if we set it up, there's going to be different ways of setting up. We're just plugging things in where they're supposed to go. Then we have to decide how we're going to solve. If x is in our fraction, we have to use cross multiplication. If x is inside of our trig function, we have to use inverse trig to get x by itself. So let's try one more. Just set up and then go through our motions. So the first thing we'll do is our labeling. Got my focus angle. Then across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. Across from my focus angle is my opposite side. And then the side touching my focus angle is my adjacent side. So we have a value for adjacent, we have an angle, and we have hypotenuse. So we'll use cosine, adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'm going to say cosine of my focus angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine of 44 is equal to adjacent 7 over my hypotenuse x. So where's the x located? Is it in the fraction or is it inside the trig? Well, it's in the fraction. So if it's in the fraction, we'll have to use cross multiplication. So the first thing I do is use my calculator to help me simplify that cosine of 44. So we'll go cosine 44. That's going to give me 0.719 or 0.72. So we'll go 0.72 is equal to 7 over x. Now we need to cross multiply, so I'll write in my hidden 1. Multiply and divide as needed. X times 0.72 is 0.72x is equal to 1 times 7 is 7. One last step. We'll divide both sides by 0.72. And we'll get x equals, I'm just going to do 7 divided by 0.72. 7 divided by 0.72 equals 9.7. So we found x is equal to 9.7. So that's how we can use cosine. Cosine focusing on using that adjacent side in the hypotenuse. So that's how we can use cosine to help us solve for the different parts of a triangle. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.